Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Refuron, and today we're going to be doing another Deep Rock Galactic build guide. This is going over the Drak-25 Plasma Carbine Overclocks and all the builds that I use for them. These may not be the most well optimized builds or anything like that, they're just the builds that I use and could potentially give you guys some ideas of how to build. First up, we're going to be starting out with Impact Deflection. This makes it so your projectiles are now bouncy, so they bounce one time off of a surface or off of an enemy. This can be really useful, and this is actually probably one of my favorite overclocks for this weapon. It comes with no downsides, and it's incredibly strong with this ability right here, Plasma Splash. This converts 5 direct damage to 5 area damage within 1 meter. Usually in Tier 1, I would go with improved thermals just so that I'm not generating as much heat per shot. It means I can shoot the gun faster, but really any of these in Tier 1 are fine. In Tier 2, I usually go with larger battery. Just the more ammo is so nice to have. The extra damage isn't bad either. If you want to go for a more damaging build, you can do that too, because this build actually does rack up damage pretty fast because of the splash damage. In Tier 3, I usually go with the Gen 2 cooling system. This is a faster cooldown and a better cooldown, so your gun doesn't overheat as much, so you can spray out quite a bit, let it cool down, then keep on spraying. Tier 4, like I said, Plasma Splash is amazing with this because once you hit even the surface in front of an enemy and it doesn't directly hit them, you're still doing that 5 area splash damage to them, and then the bullet is probably bouncing into them, dealing the other 9 damage because it splashes again and it can splash to multiple enemies. So this is really great against crowds. These other 2 in Tier 4 I don't really care for with the bouncy rounds. They are good on other builds, but not so much with the bouncy rounds. And then in Tier 5, you can pick either of these. I usually go with the thermal feedback loop. That way I get a faster rate of fire once the gun starts heating up. But the manual heat dump is a good option too if you want to take that. And if you don't want to take the improved thermals or anything, if you want to go maybe more rate of fire, more damage, and maybe more accuracy or something, or maybe hot feet, you could do that too. This build I've used before and it works just fine. This one is just probably my favorite though for the bouncy rounds. Our second overclock is the Thermal Liquid Coolant, which this one improves our cooling and it also improves our heat per shot. This one's really good, especially if you want to go with that more aggressive build or if you want to go with an even more cooldown build. This one is really flexible, I would say, because it takes care of 2 of the things that you really want to take care of with the Plasma Carbine. So you could build it the exact same way. I probably wouldn't take Plasma Splash with this one. It's not as good without certain overclocks. It's still not bad, so you could take it if you would like, but I usually like going with either the armor breaking or going with the electric damage. Electric damage is pretty good. It slows down enemies, deals damage over time. Great. Armor breaking also good against pretty much everything. And then, again, thermal feedback loop or manual heat dump. I don't really take manual heat dump with this, especially if I'm going with thermals, because that's just way overkill for the cooling. You're never going to need that. If you're going the other way, it's still kind of overkill. Usually the thermal feedback loop is better. If you want to go more damage, you could go with something like this or potentially something like this. I've ran this particular build too. I like this one because now your projectiles are faster and they're more accurate. So you can actually shoot enemies from a surprising distance away very accurately with this and still have reasonably good cooling on your gun. That's a good way to build it. Like I said, you could just build it like this, go with more cooldown, make the gun very efficient to where you can spray it for a very long time and then it cools down immediately and you can just keep spraying it if you want to use this more as a standard assault rifle. Our next one is a rewiring mod. This one is a very odd one. This one makes it so you lose out on ammo by 320, so you go from 800 to 480. That's a lot, and your overheat duration is longer, from 2.5 seconds to 3.3 seconds. But when you do overheat, you start regenerating ammo, and you actually regenerate a large amount of ammo. Let's see, on this it says up to 31.5 on average. Some people are telling me it depends on if you're taking the cooling, which I believe that is true, at least from when we were trying it on stream. I think that's what happens. And usually when you completely fire your gun and then overheat it, you lose a total of about 14 ammo for the amount of time that you've been firing it, at least with that particular build. And that's pretty ammo efficient. It's actually probably or just as ammo efficient as the M1000's Hipster, but it's with extra steps. Whereas Hipster's just, you get the buff, you get the ammo efficiency, and that's it. So this one is nowhere near as good as Hipster is, but it's still decent, and it does actually give you a reasonable amount of ammo. It's kind of surprising. I still usually like running the larger batteries on this, just in case I'm not overheating the gun constantly. You also want to take manual heat dump with this. These two are kind of, well, the larger battery's not really a necessity, but manual heat dump is definitely good to have just in case you're, only fighting one or two enemies. And in that case, you'll probably just be spraying them a little bit, but assuming you fight maybe a couple enemies, you kill them, but you're not quite overheating yet, you could either keep firing the gun until you overheat it, which I guess you could do, or you could use the manual heat dump and get the ammo back. You could go with either, but I find manual heat dump is just a little bit more easy to use. I do like going with the improved thermals, that way we get potentially more value out of it, and if I'm taking manual heat dump, it makes a little bit more sense. In tier 3, I usually go with hot feet. That's just so the gun's going to be overheating constantly anyway, so taking the one that gives us extra mobility while it's overheating makes sense. However, I know that hot feet does not stack with other movement speed buffs, because I was trying this with hot feet followed by the Zhukov's in and out, I think, which was just once you empty the guns out completely, you get bonus movement speed. And I was trying it with Unstoppable with the momentum, and it just, all of that combined wasn't working as well as I hoped it would. I figured I would just constantly get movement speed stacks, but it seems like there's a timer and they don't override one another. So you go through one duration and then to the next and then to the next. I found the same thing happens if you equip Dash. So with this build, I really don't want to be running Dash with Scout. And then in Tier 4, you can really take any of these. I like the electric damage here, but armor breaking's good and plasma splash is alright too. And then we have aggressive venting, which this one I'm by far the most disappointed out of all of these. This one I find it really, really bad. This takes away your ammo. It does make it so your overheat duration is less and your cooling rate is slightly slower. But once you overheat your gun, this makes it so you deal fire damage to all enemies within an area, as well as heat damage and fear directly around you. Which sounds decent, but the distance is so short. It's only 5 meters. So, and this is kind of omnidirectional, so it's just all around you. Once you overheat your gun, then you start, then you deal a bit of fire damage to everything around you and fear to everything around you. I really didn't find this super useful. The fire just doesn't do enough. It doesn't light things on fire all that efficiently either. It's okay on grunts, and it works really well against swarmers, but there's so many other builds that work better against those type of things, like the bouncy rounds that we've already talked about, the liquid cooling rounds that we've talked about. They just work a whole lot better for the Drak, and this one I found was just really disappointing. For this one, I usually go with the high volume rate of fire, because I need to overheat. Well, I'm going to overheat the gun anyway. It makes sense to get the heat up faster. We don't need to go with the improved thermals to have less efficient heat. You could do that if you just want to use it more as a standard assault rifle, but at that point it's kind of getting worse because you're losing out on the ammo too. Tier 2, we're going with more ammo so we can get back to our 800 rounds. We'll get a little bit more than that, but it's still not what I would like. I really wish this one didn't take your ammo. Hot feet, once again, because we're going to be overheating the gun constantly, so we might as well be able to run fast once we do overheat it. Tier 4, any of these are fine. I usually go with the armor breaking or the electric rounds for this. It's your call, whichever one you would like. And then in Tier 5, you can go with the thermal feedback loop, or you can go with the manual heat dump. Usually I went with manual heat dump just so that I could do it to kill, or at least potentially fear, grunts away from me at very close range. This one, like I said, I was probably the most disappointed in, and I think this is the worst overclock for this weapon. It's just, it does so little compared to the cost that it costs you to use it. Alright, then moving on to our unstable overclocks. Our first one is the overtuned particle accelerator. This gives us a lot more damage, nearly doubling our damage. But we lose out on ammo, we get more heat per shot, we have a whole bunch more spread, both horizontal and vertical spread. This is very noticeable. You fire out in a cone, which does make it so your effective range is much shorter. If you're trying to fire at long range with this, it's pretty difficult. And it makes it so Scout is limited to like close and medium range then, because you don't have a whole lot other than that to take as like a secondary to give you range. About the best you'd have is maybe shape shells with the shotgun. And that would be decent range, but you'd still wouldn't have super long range like you could have with the Drak, although it's not needed with the Drak either. This is really good against hordes. So first up, I take improved thermals. This is just to make it so we get roughly the same heat per shot as the base Drak, because otherwise this gun overheats real quick, and taking like the extra rate of fire overheats it really fast. Taking the faster velocity, I didn't notice that big of a difference in it. It's still not accurate at long range, so just shooting faster doesn't really help, or having faster moving projectiles doesn't really help. In Tier 2, I usually go with the larger battery. Again, I want to get my ammo back. Having the 2 extra damage will go up to 19 damage, which, okay. You don't really need that much more damage with it. It's already almost doubling your damage. So the extra ammo just makes more sense to me. In Tier 3 is where it gets kind of interesting, because you could take the custom coil alignment to reduce the spread by quite a bit, which does make you a little bit more effective in medium range, but you're still not going to have great long range. I like taking the cooling. The cooling helps a lot more for me because I'm just going to be using this at that pretty close range to spray down crowds really fast, and that's going to be about it. In Tier 4, honestly, all of these are pretty good. The electric rounds are great against pretty much everything. The plasma splash rounds are really good, actually, because they spread out your damage pretty effectively, and you're even better against crowds, which you're going to be using this mostly against, I would imagine, and you're going to be using that at close range, so splashing damage onto other enemies is a really good option and what I usually take. And then armor breaking is also a really good option, because if you're fighting something like a Praetorian or anything that has armor, a guard, it's pretty good too. And then in Tier 5, you could go with manual heat dump, or you could go with thermal feedback loop. It's completely up to you. Thermal feedback loop is going to give you even more damage per second, but be a little bit more difficult to control, or at least control the overheating. Manual heat dump will give you more control over the overheating, but if you're going with cooling, it's less necessary. It's completely your call, though. Both of these are completely fine. I've used both of them. I think I like the thermal feedback loop a little bit more. Our next overclock is the shield battery booster. So this one is very interesting. This one, so long as you have your shield up, you get more direct damage. However, if you overheat your shield, or if you overheat the gun, then your shield breaks, which is not that great. This increases your damage by 5.5 damage, which is a big damage buff. You get 50 more ammo, which is great. You get 1 more rate of fire, also great. Your overheat duration is doubled now, so it takes 5 seconds to wait for the overheat. That's a pretty long time. Heat per shot is increased by 50%, so again, overheating. Your velocity is increased by 100%, and your cooling rate is lowered by 50%. This one is one that seems like it has potential and can be good, but the likeliness of you getting to use it constantly is extremely low. Even in solo, this one still I haven't found to be incredibly useful compared to the other Drak-25 Overclocks, because having a full shield, and you need to have a full shield, you can't just have part of a shield up, is pretty difficult. If you get hit at all, your shield's done. So, you know, if you get hit by a crawler, if you get hit by a jellyfish, if you get hit by just the ground, it's really bad in certain areas like the fungus bog, where you're probably going to get poisoned from the mushrooms. It's really bad in magma core, where you're probably going to be stepping on fire, so you're going to be losing that. It's not great in groups because friendly fire also breaks your shield, and if you have anybody with a not so accurate weapon, pretty much anything that Driller has, anything that Gunner has, you're not going to have your shield up. Grenades make it real easy for you to not have your shield up, at least at full. And this one's just, I find it more annoying to try to use this one than anything. Once it is working, it's not bad. You actually get a good amount of damage from it. But when you don't, it's kind of annoying. And one thing that I would suggest taking with this is on your suit, make sure that you have the faster shields. That's just going to help. You also probably want lower shields. You just want more health, because your shield will come up a little bit quicker then. So when it does start recharging, it might save you that 0.1 of a second or something like that. Anyway, for the build, this one I found you can kind of build however you would like. I usually just go with the kind of standard build here. I want improved cooling because we've already taken away our cooling and we've already taken away our heat per shot. Extra ammo is nice, but even more damage is also pretty nice, 16.5 damage. This makes it so you can one-shot swarmers, which is kind of nice, but even so, the gun fires so fast that you probably won't notice, and 2 shots will be fine. Any of these in tier 4 are fine. I usually go with the electric rounds because they're just kind of nice and I would like things to stay away from me. And then going with the thermal feedback loop is useful because manual heat dump doesn't really help us here. We don't want to be overheating our gun because it's going to break our shield. Even if you do use manual heat dump, it still breaks your shield. I found that out too. So manual heat dump is completely off of the table to take, unless you just don't want the extra rate of fire from thermal feedback loop to kind of manage your heating better. But then just make sure to never hit the reload button. And then our last overclock is the thermal exhaust feedback, which sounds very similar to aggressive venting and stuff, but this one is really good. This one increases your overheat duration and increases your heat per shot. However, this makes it so once you've reached 50% heat with your gun, you start doing fire damage and you start being able to light things on fire, giving you a really good overclock here. This one is really strong, especially if you just kind of flutter it on that 50% mark or just before 100% mark if you really want to go all the way with it. You get a lot of damage in crowds. You get a lot of damage to single targets. This one's great for fighting things like Praetorians, oppressors, really anything big that can't move around too quick. This one is really strong for that. For this, I usually go with, once again, improved thermals. This is just so I'm not generating heat per shot, although it isn't necessary with this because if you want to get up to heat faster and you want to start burning stuff, rate of fire is better. I just like the improved thermals for kind of keeping my heat more manageable once I get to, about the 70% mark, and I just kind of want to flutter it around there. More ammo, just to have extra ammo. Extra ammo is really nice, especially with this because a lot of our damage is going to be coming from the fire, at least against large enemies. And against small enemies, we're going to be killing them pretty quick anyway, so we're not going to have to worry about that too much. Tier 3 is kind of an interesting option. You can go with Gen 2 cooling. I found that one is okay. You could go with the more accuracy. That one is also good. Or you could potentially go with hot feet. I usually go with hot feet just on the off chance that I do end up overheating my gun by accident. It doesn't happen too often, but it does happen. So if it does overheat, I can at least run away from the situation. In Tier 4, all of these are really good. The electric rounds is nice because then you're burning and electrocuting something, which is great. The Plasma Splash also applies the fire on the splash, I believe. I don't know if it applies the damage, but I think it applies the fire status effect burning things. So that's not bad. And then armor breaking is always useful, especially if you want to kill big things even quicker. I think usually I go with the electric rounds, but I've switched between all of these and I found them all to be pretty useful. And then in Tier 5, I usually go with the thermal feedback loop, so I get faster rate of fire. Once we get up to that, 50 to 70% where I kind of just want to keep the bar going like this. This one does take time to get used to, though. You can overheat your gun very quickly. It's very easy to do that. If you are doing that a lot, I would recommend taking the hot feet. If you're not doing that a whole lot, and you're fairly confident in your skills, you could always go with the custom cooling alignment, or you could even go with the Gen 2 cooling. If you know the rate that it's cooling down at, that's a pretty good option. But right away, I would recommend taking hot feet. It's just going to be a little bit easier, so if your gun does overheat, it's not that big a deal. You get that 2 seconds of faster move speed, so you can at least run somewhere. That's all the overclocks with the Drak. The Drak has some really cool overclocks. A lot of them actually change the way the Drak works. And there's a lot of builds for it, which is also really cool. I really enjoy this weapon. Thanks everybody for watching this. I really do appreciate it. Special thanks to the members of this channel as well as the supporters over on Patreon. You guys get early access to videos like this. I hope you guys are enjoying that. And if anybody else would like to join that, feel free to down in the links in the description. And remember to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.